Sister Jayanti, how wonderful to be here with you after a long time.
Happy to connect with you again, Tamsin.
So most of you would know Sister Jayanti, but a bit of background. She is the director of the Brahmacharya in Europe. She is also the United Nations representative for the Brahmacharya in Geneva, and very recently was appointed the additional administrative head of the Brahmacharya worldwide. So that is quite something. So those are her positions, but let me tell you a bit about her because I have the fortune of knowing her quite closely over many years. And I do remember one time in Madhaban, I was a young sister and I was bereft about something, and I ran to her room crying about something. I just needed to speak to somebody, and I instinctively ran to Sister Jayanti's room. And I burst in through the door and she saw me, and I remember the look on your face, Jayanti, then you just said, "Oh, Tamsin, what's going on?" But you weren't judgmental, you weren't overly concerned, you were very light-spirited. And I remember at the time we had a bit of a laugh and a bit of a cry, or I had the cry. But the thing that struck me about you is your ability to give spiritual counsel with love and respect and power in equal measure. And this is a great thing, and I do consider you to be a true spiritual friend for many reasons, and this is one of the great memories I have of you. And another gift that you have, Sister Jayanti, is to bridge the world of the East and the West. And I think it's a great topic for this because both people from the East and the West, purity is a great topic of inquiry. So if you could just talk to us for a while about your experience of purity. Baba says it's the foundation of our life, it's a virtue, it's a power. So if you'd like to speak about your experience of purity, please, we'd love to hear.
Thank you for this opportunity. Because yes, I think that out of all the different maryadas that Baba's teaching us, the disciplines that can allow us to become elevated, maybe it's this that in a way seems most challenging, and not just for those who want to follow the path, but of course in the family situation, it was the biggest challenge that everybody had to face in the early days. And since then also, when somebody's in a relationship that is a stable one, then of course it comes up as a very big issue. And I was fortunate that I came to Baba at an early age. And so purity at that moment was very, very natural. And I didn't even know about the process of purification that I would have to go through later on. All those discoveries came much later. And what I found was that just the practice of soul consciousness allowed me to experience a very natural connection with Baba in such a beautiful way that I thought that God is the one who's fulfilling all my needs and is giving me everything that I could ever have asked for. And so the early period was really a honeymoon. It was very smooth, very natural, very easy, really a stage of flying for the soul. And I think for many of us, we've been through that first period in which everything is very natural and easy. And then at some point, I won't use the word Maya, but I see it more as being able to look within and see your own sanskaras. And you see that whatever you know of yourself in this birth, this life, is part of the story, but it's definitely not the whole story. And as time goes on, you discover more and more bits that need to be cleaned. And my first discovery was about attachment, and how attachment is such a strong pull that makes you want to give time, attention, energy to one individual or two individuals rather than experience God's love and being an instrument for love and sharing it with many others. Now you become quite focused, this individual. And I see how Baba cautions us about attachment in a big way. But what I've also seen is that attachment very often then leads to the number one vice, lust. In the early period, it's very close friendship, and then it's very good connection with somebody, and you seek them out again and again. And before you know it, you're dependent on them. And the attachment bug has come. And I think it is this confusion between friendship and attachment and pure love that then gets a little bit jumbled. And so I can see how that leads to lust. And so it's a difficult thing to sort out, especially when you're young, but I suppose at any age. And so to go through that cleansing process, and it is a process. And the sweet thing about Baba is that anyway, if you're single when you come, it's the norm that you should be following celibacy. But within that, we don't always understand how and what and why and all of this. And I see that for me also, it was understanding and then experiencing, both in that order. And so first was just the experience of God's love. And that experience just made me want to surrender. There's nothing else I want to do in my life. And so when I was challenged, well, you're only 19, how can you decide what you want for the whole of your future? And I said, well, my mother married at age 16 and she had me age 18 and she hasn't changed her mind since. And so the other person became quiet. But yes, it is a very big commitment that we choose to make. Nobody told me that I should or I have to. It wasn't that at all. Rather, it was that, well, can't you wait for a while? But no, my impatience at that time and my passion at that time was, no, it has to be now. And I'm very glad that I did that, because it meant that, of course, I was then able to surrender to Brahma Baba and not later to an avyakt, intangible form. I think that would have been more difficult for me. And also, I think I would have questioned myself. Is it my guilt that's making me say, I want to surrender? Because when Sakar Baba was there, Baba obviously knew the soul, and Baba would speak to me as if I am on service in that way. And I know that if I'd waited another 6 months, 7 months, Baba would be avyakt, and I would question my motive in what I was doing. And so it was absolutely, and Baba says drama is perfect. We don't always agree, but in fact, it is actually absolutely perfect. The story of every soul unfolds in exactly as it did last Kalpa, but also exactly as it needs to happen now. And so that passion, that love for God was such that there was nothing else in my world. I didn't want anything else in my world. And of course, then service came in, and service has been a double-edged sword. It's been great to be engaged and to be with Baba and come closer to the family and the seniors through service. But it's also been a situation in which there's so much effort and energy that goes again into the doing and doing, that the being gets left behind. And so a big, big caution, if you want to experience purity, make sure that you follow Baba's mantra of balance, and that is going to bring blessings. Balance in the terms of time for the self, and secondly, time for service. And drama redressed that balance for me, because then Baba asked me to come back to London, to my parents' home. And then it was stony ground and there was no service. And then that was a time that Didi actually inspired me to do self-service. And so from October to May, which had been intense service in India, now I had at least a year or so in which there was time for reflection and tapasya. In terms of experiencing purity, I really want to underline that the practice of soul consciousness, the practice of connecting with Baba and really filling yourself with power so that you're very aware of what your destination is and where you're going is vital. It's so easy to get distracted by the consciousness of my own body, and in that state then to have the vision wander in different directions. But soul consciousness and Baba with you, and that is the shield that protects you. And it's the armor that's able to keep you safe. And so purity and soul consciousness absolutely go together. And of course, the problem is that if there hasn't been that attention on soul consciousness, then the distraction that's come in is such that you're moving into that dark area in which many things can happen. But the problem with that is that it's absolutely the antithesis of soul consciousness, because the pull of the physical senses is such that it drags you down totally into the emotions and the feelings connected with the physical senses. And so the protection, but also the medicine for purity is soul consciousness. And I think the greatest loss, if there is any diversion away, is that we lose contact with Baba. And so it's nobody else passing judgment on me, but it's what I do to myself. I preserve my purity and I feel close to Baba and I can experience God's love. And I move away from that, and that distraction is such that I've lost contact with Baba. And then, of course, I'm not experiencing God's love, and the tumble down becomes very fast. So all these things are completely related. God's love keeps us safe. And where I've turned my back on God, I've sought human love, then that's going to take me further away from Baba. And so when Baba says it's like falling from the 5th floor, it means that I've really lost contact with God, which was the original reason I came to Baba for. I wanted to experience God's love. When I started my journey, it was just curiosity, soul consciousness. But beyond that, when I understood about God, I wanted to have that feeling of God's love. And in that early period, it was just swoosh, Baba would pull the soul. And later then, if there's been a distraction, attachment, and then further, then you can't experience God's love in the same way. And it becomes an effort and a struggle to maintain soul consciousness and come back to that same level. And so experiencing purity is absolutely the joy of Brahman life, because when I sit for yoga and I can experience myself in Paramdham, and it's a journey that we can all experiment with, can I go beyond this consciousness of the body and fly to my home and be in that world of light. We talk a lot about the world of silence, but it's also the world of total purity, constant, stable, unshakable, nothing disturbing that purity. And when we go home later, we won't know that that's what it is, because the soul will be silent. But now, A, we experience the sweetness of our silent home, but B, we experience the purity of our home. And so having experienced that purity of the home, and then coming down back here into the physical dimension, you can feel what it's like to have that awareness of the divine beings of the golden age. It's still Kali Yuga around me, but my consciousness has changed. And the consciousnesses of seeing the beauty of the spirit, the soul, the consciousnesses of engaging with another without any bondage incurring. And at that moment, then it's really a very lovely experience of a pure connection, not just with one or two, but with everyone. And so the purity of the home and the purity of the beginning of the cycle, because deities have bodies, but the purity of the consciousness means that they're able to maintain that vision, that awareness, and the quality of interaction is that experience of purity, an exchange of pure love and joy. And so I'm seeing that the more I maintain soul consciousness, Baba's love, and keep traveling to my home, I can fill myself more and more with the power of purity, and it becomes a strength that the soul is able to have. I loved it the other day when Baba said, how do you conquer the world? How are you able to become a master of the world? It is through the power of purity. That's it. A very simple thing, my own natural, original state of being. And it gives me such incredible power, not over anyone else, but the authority to have self-sovereignty and the authority to be able to be the master of all that I see around me. There may not be any thrones for me here or in the future, I don't know, but just that state of freedom and being in charge of the self totally, that is the fruit of purity, freedom. I see how purity sounds hard work, but the freedom that one experiences through purity is something that everybody wants. And so truly is the experience of freedom without any dependency on anyone at all. Attachments are huge dependencies, and lust, of course, then the physical relationship becomes a big bondage, not just a dependency, but a big bondage. And so Baba's showing me the way to freedom.
Jayanti Ben, gosh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I agree with everything you said, of course. The experience of purity, God's love as a power, the disciplines, how they give freedom and strength to the soul to be the master of the self. There is sometimes a middle period, though, when, and this is one of the questions I received, when, yes, we've experienced Baba's love, and yes, we know our story because Baba's told us our story of our original purity. But for whatever reason, I cannot experience Baba's love. I'm doing everything I can to remain soul conscious, and I'm following the practices and everything, but I'm kind of lost in no man's land. And the need for spiritual intimacy is so great in the soul, and the most recent remembrance is of intimacy with a human. So what to do? What to do at that time when a Brahmin is feeling like that?
Dadi Janki used to say to us that she always had a very close spiritual friend, and that was Didi Manmoini. And so whatever would come up for her, there would be somebody whom she trusted, with whom she could discuss something, but not just be able to share, but to be able to get guidance to move on to a higher stage. And so I would recommend that every Brahmin should have someone whom they trust, and they're able to talk to them about whatever it is they're going through. And if that friend is somebody who is more experienced than you, further ahead on the path than you, that's even more useful, because then they'll guide you, then they'll support you. Because at that moment, to go just sit in yoga will just mean turbulence. Probably it's not very helpful. One thing is to have someone you can trust and be a friend. But the second thing is to write. Writing is a tremendous mirror, but also it's a tremendous release. And so journal. And so your own private sacred journal, totally yours, not for anyone else's eyes at all. And you're sharing with Baba. You're writing to Baba. To talk to Baba in your mind is wonderful. But of course, in this situation, it's much easier to actually sit and write to Baba. And after you've written whatever it is you're going through, be soul conscious, connect with Baba with love, and then read whatever it is you have written. From that perspective of sitting with Baba and being a detached observer of yourself. And maybe that will give a few insights about what you need to do at this moment. And usually the things that trouble us keep coming up again and again. It's not so many new things that create obstructions, but the same situation keeps coming up. And so every time I sit and write, whatever it is that I need to express, Baba's watching, Baba's listening, and Baba's reaching out to you also. One of the beautiful things that Baba has often commented on is the honesty of Baba's children in foreign lands, which means that they know that honesty is the way to transform. And so just sharing by journaling and sitting with Baba afterwards, showing Baba and reading it as a detached observer, I think will give insights into how to move forward.
Is that a practice you've done, Sister Jayanti? It sounds like it is.
Yes, it is. It's very useful. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Another question that is a little bit related to that is, so Baba, I mean, our path talks about, although Daddy Janki didn't like this word very much, but the process of transformation. And we talk freely about the hindrances and the vices, but with lust, it's not really talked about. So what happens is that some Brahmins who maybe have wandered off and had a physical relationship with somebody, there's a lot of shame connected with that. And so how to resolve that as part of the process of purification? Is it the same kind of practice that you were just mentioning then? Because it can be a real thing for Brahmins to overcome on the path, even though they want to stay on the path.
I'm seeing two different situations in what you're describing. One is a process in which I'm going through, and it's an internal one. And what I've accepted is that, like when it's couples that come to us and both come together, we usually say to them, okay, try this for a month and see how you feel about it. With vegetarian diet, we say the same thing. Try this for a month and see the impact it has on you. So to that extent, there's a process. But in terms of somebody who is single and they say to Baba, Baba, I want to belong to you, because there's something that's pulled them to Baba, and there is that very pure love that they're experiencing. At that moment, they also say, okay, Baba, I want to follow the path of purity so that I stay free, because I now understand that any other type of relationship is going to lead to bondage. And so I think that that external commitment is one that I make, whether it's for vegetarian diet. Yes, I'm going to do this for a month and then I decide. In the same way, I'm going to do this for a month, even if I am alone. But within that period, of course, then there'll be storms in the mind that Baba talks about. The sanskars haven't yet changed. The sanskars are still there. And so gradually one has to deal with that. So I'm seeing that there is a process. It's not that Baba expects the mind to become Satopradhan instantly. The physical thing has to happen because otherwise it's bondage that's being either created or being added onto all the time. And then to reverse that is going to be very difficult. Say like with anger, I explode. So Baba doesn't say keep exploding. Baba says, at least stop giving sorrow to another.
Yes.
And then you're dealing with making sure it's not suppressed because it'll lead to depression. You're making sure you understand the mechanics of where this is coming from. So there's a process. The same thing is with this first vice. Baba's saying, okay, at least don't add to your burden. And then further, yes, you have that opportunity to see, why is there a pull of the senses? What is it that's creating this? Can I practice a deeper level of soul consciousness and make my connection with Baba so strong that I can start experiencing God's love again? And so maybe I've been slack on an external level. I've been following the maryadas, the system, the timetable. But, there's a difference between listening to the Murali, because I go to class every day, and a difference in reading the Murali, going to the Murali, to listen to the Murali with that consciousness of learning.
Yes.
What am I learning from the Murali? In recent times, Baba's been very strong about not getting caught up with name and form. And of course, that isn't even a question of male, female, or any of that. Baba states it could be anyone that you're drawn to. So am I actually learning something from the Murali every day? And so if I've been a bit slack in these things, because everything on the spiritual path is consciousness, it's not just what I do physically, externally. It's the way in which I do it, the consciousness with which I do it, the love with which I do or I don't. So all of that's part of that mix. So let me go back to first principles. What am I doing at Amrit Vela? Why am I doing it? What am I doing when I'm reading the Murali or hearing the Murali? So getting your consciousness back on track with these spiritual inner disciplines that only you know about. Others just see you sitting there. They don't know what's going on in here. And so if I'm aware that all of these factors can help me move forward, and I go back to that love, that passion, that desire to learn, then I think I'll be able to go through that process of seeing, where are these thoughts coming from? Food has a very deep connection with these physical sensations and all of this. You would have noticed maybe that the senior yogis in Madhuban will not have very hot, spiced food. I saw Jagdish Pai, and he was, of course, a Brahmacharya from birth, but he knew that hot, spicy things, also sour things like tamarind, chili, all of these things are the wrong stimulation for the body. It's not helpful on the yogi path. And so if I'm aware of things like this also, and maybe I need to do a little bit of reading about it, but there are things that will tell you what is sattva, what is raja, what is tamasic, and so forth. And so move away from that middle level to the sattva stage. Food, simple, cooked in God's remembrance, offered to God, and then shared in that awareness of being with God, eating with God. That will also calm the physical senses and allow the soul to reclaim its peace and purity. Peace and purity are very linked together. When there's impurities that start coming, there's a lot of turbulence in the mind. My peace is gone. And maybe that's one of the early indicators that things are not quite right. Am I able to be Om Shanti? If I'm not able to be Om Shanti, just with a single thought, press the button and I should be Om, I should be peace. Yes. But if I'm not able to do that, let me start exploring what's going on with Amrit Vela, what's going on with my Murli session, what's going on with my food. And if I'm really interested in becoming Sattva Pradhan, and I think for me that is a very, very attractive destination to come back to my total full state of purity, but also connected with that is my karmatit stage. Yeah. A very big attraction for me was freedom. And karmatit to me is the state of perfect freedom. No karmic accounts with anyone, anywhere, totally free. And yes, a huge amount of charity, the punya karma, the pure karma that I've accumulated and filled myself with, I'm carrying the power of that, the power of spirituality. Just think about Adi Prakashmani, and you could see the fruits of purity. You could see the joy, the freedom, the lightness, the radiance, the spiritual power, the authority, the love. Yeah, is this not what I am attracted by? Do I not want something like this?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's interesting you're talking about we've moved into the level of consciousness and the role that that plays in purity. And I'm remembering Baba said earlier this week that devotion begins with the feelings of the mind. And I thought, gosh, it's the feelings of the mind, maybe before anything happens in the physical, that start the expected and the accurate downfall through the Copper Age and the Iron Age. And then I guess it's the same, it's the feelings of the mind that are a catalyst for our upliftment and our purification. So can you talk a bit about the feelings of the mind and the role that they play in our purification process?
I see how peace is a feeling that I have. You know, try and define peace, try and define love, try and define purity. And it's not so easy. It really isn't. You can see the outcome of peace and love and purity, but what is it exactly? That state which is completely clean, sparkling, that state which has no stains on it whatsoever. So all of these qualities are the things that are experienced, are felt. So I can feel the peace within. I can feel the love that I'm receiving from God. And also being surrounded by the love of the family. I can feel that. I can also feel what purity is like in my perfect pure state. And so these are the things I need to cultivate. You know, it's like when Daddy used to say, clean out the chit, the memory track. And what she meant by that, what she was doing, you know how she would come up with stories of Brahma Baba 70 years ago, 80 years ago. And when she'd speak about it, it would be like it was yesterday. Daddy, how can you recall such incidents and keep them so fresh in your mind? And she would say, especially when the body's out of action, I go into silence and I emerge all those beautiful memories. And I play with Baba. I play with those memories. And so those memories then give me strength and courage to get back on my feet and start doing what I need to do. But also it just meant that her head was full of all of these beautiful stories. And this is then what she was sharing and what we would go to hear from her. So what am I doing with the feelings that I have? Am I emerging those pure, powerful feelings that can uplift me and make me radiant and shine? Or am I allowing negative feelings to pull me back into the consciousness of the body and become heavy and stodgy and flat, and things get lethargic and tired and all of those things? So Gyan means having the wisdom to see the choices that I have in front of me. And then further Gyan means to be able to make the right choice. The company, what sort of company am I keeping? Am I keeping company with people who are toxic? Here's somebody who's distressed. I'm talking about within the Brahmin family. I know that they're discontent, and I know that they're constantly finding fault. I know that they're going to be highly critical. Now, if I can be with them and shift them from that negativity into another state, great. Do the service that you can do. But if after 1, 2, 3 trials, rather than me impacting them, they're continuing to pour out all this stuff and I'm absorbing it in my own awareness, how does that help me? And how does that help them? I haven't done them any favor. Sometimes we false compassion, where sometimes we feel that, they need to let it all out. If they let it all out once, and second time when I meet them, they're ready to hear something else, great. Or if they let it out once to me, and then to you, and then to another, and then to another, well, they're just looking for a dustbin. I don't want to be another dustbin. So what am I exposing my thoughts and my feelings to? Am I exposing them to good company that's going to be helping me move forward? Or am I exposing myself to toxic company and I don't have the capacity and the strength to change them, but rather it's impacting me? So let me be very cautious about that.
Gentlemen, what if the rubbish bin is the self? What about those times when there is negative thinking and we can't get beyond it? How do we deal with those negative feelings of the mind without suppressing them? How do we do that as part of the purification process? Can you please talk about that? Like, what do we do when we have those negative thoughts about the self?
If a Brahmin has come to the point where they're not really able to control all this negativity and they seek counseling, that's absolutely fine, because you can take the help that you want and get back on track, and then it's up to you. But now you've understood what you need to do. And if it's not yet reached the point where I'm thinking about external help, then write it down. But also write down, having spilled out whatever it is that I need to, then also do a list of gratitude. What is there in my life that I'm grateful for? Start right from childhood. 100 points from childhood to today, things that I'm grateful for. But that's only the first step. Second step, tonight, once I've done that 100 list tonight, let me look back over the day and write 10 points of gratitude from that day. Morning, and the day hasn't yet begun. So maybe I'm grateful that the sun is shining, or maybe I want it to be cold and rainy. And so I'm grateful that it's cold and rainy. And I'm grateful that the plants and animals are being given fresh water. So just the things of natural life and my surroundings and whatever. And also the state of mind that I woke up with. So can I write that list of gratitude? Please don't give up with this. Do it for at least 3 months minimum.
Oh, great.
And see if it makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that once you start writing down things that you're grateful for, then you also begin to appreciate who you are and the fortune that you have received.
Mm.
Because there's no Brahmin who doesn't have fortune. Every Brahmin came to Baba because of their fortune, but we lose sight of it and then we get into other things. And as you said, especially negativity about myself. But that's because I'm churning that all the time. Can I churn something different? Gratitude is a great way to cut through the negativity and start moving in a positive direction. Example, I can't be angry and be grateful. The two things don't match together.
Yes.
And so if I'm emerging points of gratitude, real things, not imaginary things, real things of gratitude, I have to smile and say, thank you, Baba. And the anger is dissipated. It's not suppressed, it's dissipated. And so this is what I must do. Really build up my level of self-esteem by being grateful for what I have already, not what I hope to have, but what Baba has blessed me with already.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Oh, one thing I wanted to say as well. It reminded me, Jayanti Ben, when you were talking about writing gratitude journal, and Daddy Janki once said to me that I should write all the titles Baba has given me. And I went to her the next day with a 2-page list, and she was a bit disappointed I only came up with 2 pages, but it was a great exercise. Also, really inspiring self-respect. So it just reminded me. So a final question. It's about the practice of Brahmacharya as a yogic refinement tool, as a way to kind of refine the mind and refine the heart. Can you talk about that, the practice of Brahmacharya as a method to refine the mind and the heart?
It is absolutely that, because it's making me self-sufficient so that I start looking inwards. Otherwise, constantly, I'm an appendage to another individual. And so now it's me and God. And so it starts that journey of introversion. And when I start looking inside myself, that's the way of purification and refinement. And the methods that Baba has given us to be able to elevate the soul are such a long list of things. The titles that Baba's given us, let me remember who I truly am. And then further, the blessings that Baba gives us every day in the Murli. Again, once I'm going inside rather than my attention going here and there outside, I see how that process of introversion and the source of wisdom that Baba supplies us with continually is quite incredible, to be able to keep my thoughts and my feelings on an elevated level. And so this is why Baba says churn. Sometimes we say that, well, churning is good preparation for lectures. Well, it is, no question about that. but churning is the way to be able to purify my mind, my feelings, my intellect, and to move higher and higher. But without Brahmacharya, I'm always in the context of another individual. And so everything is out there. It's me, but how are you going to respond? What are you going to say? Can I do this? How are you going to feel about it? So there's always this back and forth, back and forth. But now, Brahmacharya, and I'm liberated from that. It's a liberation. And so now I can spend that time that otherwise would go out there looking inwards and going through my own journey of purification and taking help from Baba. And yes, the right company. But essentially, it's me and Baba that's going to allow me to reach my perfect, pure state of being.
So how do I know that I am reaching?
Sorry, one other thing I just want to mention. Mahatma Gandhi used Brahmacharya as a very effective tool to gain energy, spiritual energy, spiritual authority, and also physical energy, to be able then to do what he did and lead a whole country to independence. He would not have been able to accomplish that had he not been following Brahmacharya. But he understood the power of Brahmacharya that gave spiritual power, but also that physical energy to do the right thing.
Well, I think that is a perfect introduction to the final moments of this fantastic interview. Thank you, Sister Jayanti. And we'd like to finish just with a moment of silence and Baba's drishti, your drishti. And thank you so much. There's so much more to ask, but really appreciate your time.
Thank you for very good questions, Tamasin. Thank you.